Good morning. It's good to see you this morning. Hope you had a great week. Let's pray together. Great are you, Lord. Great in your mercy to us. Great in your love for us. Great in the sacrifice that you are willing to make for us. We are so thankful to you for the ways you continue to bless us. We thank you for this church, for the work that it does in this community, for all those who took part yesterday in the Coats for Kids and the days leading up to that, to touch the community, for all those who are participating in the Matthew 25 ministry and seeing to it that people in our community don't go hungry. And for all the many things, many ways that individuals in this group assist others in this community. We're thankful to you that you've given us guidance, examples, and instruction on how to live in a culture that is so radically different from your ways, from the ways that you teach us. We pray that you would help us to be the light in this community. Help make us servants of yours and make us servants of those around us. Make us loving servants of one another. Thank you for Jesus and for your mercy. It's in his name we pray. Amen. I want to start. The song. I forgot about the song. Tracy's distracted. There we go. You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own treasured possession, called out of darkness to marvelous light. You were not a kindred people, now you are a family. You had not received God's mercy, now his grace has set you free. You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own treasured possession, called out of darkness to marvelous light. Great. Thank you for doing that with me. I want to start with one of the most obvious, one of the times God is most blatant about this is how you live when you're an alien and a stranger in a strange land. And it's from Jeremiah, if you want to turn there. It's not a short verse. 4 verses, 4 through 7. Jeremiah 29, verses 4 through 7. I'm sure you remember Jeremiah as a prophet. Jeremiah lives in Jerusalem. And sometimes the history there can be confusing. If the Israelites have been carried off to Babylon, how is there an Israelite prophet in Jerusalem still? Well, when Nebuchadnezzar invaded Judah, this part of what used to be Israel, when he invades Judah, he does not conquer Jerusalem the first time. And he comes back a few years later when the king of Judah decides he's going to ally with Egypt and he's going to resist. He's not paying those taxes anymore to Babylon. So in that time period between the conquering of Judah and making them a tributary nation to Babylon, and then Nebuchadnezzar coming back and destroying Jerusalem and leveling the city and the temple and everything there, there are still a lot of people in Judah in that living there, a lot of Jews still living there. So Jeremiah is the big-time prophet living in Jerusalem, and he writes to the exiles who are already in Babylon, and these include people like Daniel, whom we know about, and people we call Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those sound familiar to you? Later on today, we're going to talk about what the real names are, because in Babylon, they've been renamed with partial names of Babylonian gods, which if you can imagine, if you're a loyal follower of God, what kind of insult is that your names are now Babylonian god names? Anyway, this is what Jeremiah writes to the Jews who are in exile in Babylon. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Who carried them? Who took them to Babylon? God says he did it. God did it. This is on purpose. This is not an accident. But this is what he tells them to do. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. So it's not like they're supposed to keep their bags packed and get ready to go back home, right? They're supposed to do what they can in where they are. And then marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Kind of life as usual, isn't it? Increase in number there. Do not decrease. Keep having kids. Increase your population. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you in exile. Are we supposed to help our community do better? Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. They have been dragged into a culture, a city, an empire that's as wicked, immoral, and decadent as Sodom and Gomorrah. They're even compared in the Old Testament. It's just as bad. What did God do to Sodom and Gomorrah? Yeah, but this is different tact. Bringing the people of God into this city and into this empire. I want to go now to Hebrews 11. The Hebrew writer, and I think most of you already know, we don't know who the Hebrew writer is, but he talks about heroes of faith. You've heard about this chapter all your life in church, Hebrews 11. This is verses 13 through 16, and I'm bringing this up because it identifies each of these heroes as a foreigner and a stranger. They're aliens in the land that God calls them to go to. It's not like they said, hey, let's move to Nebraska. That's not the way this happened. God called them, and they went. And I hadn't thought about this before, but couldn't they at any time have gone back to their country of origin, most of these people, when they wanted to? But they trusted God instead. So, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And I confess to you, I have a hard time seeing myself that way. That as an alien or a foreigner in this land, in the place I live. Even though I have moved around a lot, I don't think I can look back and say, God called me to Benton, Arkansas. God called me to Texas. I don't think I can look back and see that. What country of origin could we return to if we wanted to? Not really a thing for us, is it, really? Can we go back to heaven if that was our choice? Now, I think most of us, depending on our age, most of us can look back with nostalgia and want to go back to a different time, a better time, a better place, or just maybe a more innocent perspective. Don't you think that our nostalgia may be just we didn't really know what was going on around us? I know this is the way it was for me. I didn't know what was happening in the world around me. I was oblivious. So any nostalgia I might feel about a simpler time or a more innocent time, it wasn't the world I lived in. I don't believe. Going on in Hebrews 11, verses 24 through 26. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. I have a little trouble with this verse because I'm not sure I see a lot of evidence until Moses is close to the end of his life where he looks ahead and sees a Messiah. So I wonder, the Hebrew writer is inspired, I'm assuming, so he knows more than I do about it. But I see Moses recognizing in the book of Deuteronomy when he's saying his farewells to the Israelites before they go into the promised land, where he talks about somebody who's going to come in his place. And he's not talking about Joshua. It's pretty clear he's talking about Jesus. But that's at the end of his life, and maybe not when he makes a choice at the age of 40 not to be Egyptian royalty anymore. Anyway, Moses grows up being Egyptian royalty. We all know that. And the Hebrew writer finds it admirable that he chose not to go back to his safe, nostalgic place where things would have been a lot better for him. And I wonder, have you ever thought about this? Do you think sometimes he sat in his tent in the desert of the Sinai and he's just listened to a whole day of complaining from the Israelites that he's leading, and he remembers in his 20s and 30s and maybe in his teens when there were people waiting on him hand and foot, hey, Hermes, peel me a grape. And somebody's fanning him, and he's sitting in a comfy chair and just relaxing. Huh?
He gave up a lot.
Gave up a lot. Do you think he ever thought back to that time and thought, he's human, yeah. And, people weren't whining at him. If they had complaints, you didn't tell the prince.
I wonder, did he count the cost before?
Right.
There is a cost.
And when God calls him when he's 80, he's pretty resistant to the idea, isn't he? But I just think, was Moses filled with regret? He served God from 80 to 120 in his age. And I wonder if he felt some regret about how hard his life was after he obeyed God's call. I don't know. He looks a whole lot stronger than me. Hebrews 11, and this is verses 32 through 34. And he talks about, the Hebrew writer talks about from weakness to strength. And I can't tell you how many times I feel too weak to do something I'm supposed to do. And what more shall I say? Again, we're talking about heroes here. I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames. Okay, who shut the mouths of lions? I heard somebody say it. Daniel, yes, thank you. And who quenched the fury of the flames? It's the same book. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Very good. Just so we know who we're talking about here. And escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength. Now, if you look at that, especially that first list, you know, Gideon and Barak and Samson were not the most courageous people and fearless and just jumped up to do God's will and serve the children of Israel. They were pretty reluctant. But they became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. I want to go to 1 John just for a moment, because I know that my perspective is not as much like this as it needs to be. They were strong because they trusted their God. And what do I fail to do sometimes because I'm not sure it's going to be okay? I'm not sure I trust God to make it all okay. And to me, that's partly a trust issue, and it's partly sometimes when you trust God, things are going to go badly for you personally. You're sacrificing. You're going to make a big sacrifice. And maybe I just don't want that. And so I might be resistant. And, you know, the Hebrew writer points out that these people were looking ahead. And can I do that? Can I focus far enough ahead? I read a book a couple of months ago, and y'all may be getting tired of the books that I mentioned, but there's a book called The Pastor as Minor Poet. And a dear friend gave the book to me and asked me to pass it around after I read it. It's not a long book. But there were a lot of insights there that I never expected from a book with that title. But one of the things the author says is that leaders cannot see their job or their duty as in churches as being a job of satisfying the customers. And I'm reading another book right now that I don't even want to admit that I'm reading, but it's called The Body, and it's about the church. And you'd have to do a lot of research to find the book, so you're not going to find it and read it and go, wow, you're an idiot for reading this book. But one of the things I did get from this book is the McChurch concept, you know, McDonald's McChurch, where, you know, it's kind of a drive-through thing. You have customers who come in once a week and sit for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you serve the customers, and then they go home, and hopefully they're satisfied. And of course, the point is that's not what church is supposed to be about, and that's not what leaders are for. And sometimes the leaders can forget that, yeah, we want you to be happy about this. The problem, and there's a really big problem that comes from that, is which people do you make happy? Because there's a lot of different opinions about what should be happening, right? Just for a little bit of humor to throw in here, there's an online thing called the Babylon Bee. Has anybody heard about it? Anybody y'all know about it? Okay. I'm getting kind of tired of it. It's the same. It's like they say they only know 2 jokes and they use them all the time. But one of their ideas was to put a suggestion box in an evangelical church. They would consider us among the evangelical churches. And of course, they're making this up. It's not really true. But these are suggestions they say came into this one church's suggestion box. We should sing more hymns. Not a bad request. Hymns are great. And this seems totally doable. And then number 2, we should sing fewer hymns. Oops, which group do you satisfy? And then the next one, number 3, here's a complete list of the songs I would like to sing in the church year. And I will only sing these ones. That's pretty straightforward and to the point. Number 4, a prayer request card with gum stuck to it, which they say is an improvement over most prayer requests. Number 5, please make the sermons shorter. They've already been shaved down to 15 minutes is the response from the church. Number 6, here is my 12-page proposal for how to completely overhaul the leadership structure of the church. And, of course, that would be very helpful. Number 7, sermons are still too long. Please make them even shorter. The people have spoken. Number 8, you're getting too political. Jesus would never preach a sermon on abortion. It's way too political. Number 9, you're not political enough. Seriously, stop being such a coward. Number 10, no sermons. Just stop preaching. No, and I thought your sense of humor is probably different from mine. Most people's are. But I ran across that and couldn't leave it out. The next thing comes from Pastor is Minor Poet again, and this is the last one from that book. But to be of service to the Holy Spirit who is at work in human lives, the leaders can never reduce ministry to servicing members' complaints about the church. Would you agree with that? I know some of you work in education, some of you have businesses, and sometimes you cannot accommodate all the complaints, right? Yeah, because if you fix this for them, it ruins it for everybody else.
If you try, it's better not even to try.
You're in education, right? Yeah. And so all you can do is what's best for the most, right? Except that in a church, what's best for what may be pleasing to the most people may not be what's best. Would you agree with that? Sometimes, like Moses, you have to drag people kicking and screaming into obedience to God. We are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was visiting with some people this morning about family issues, about dealing with family members. We were talking about some in our elders meeting this morning. There are things you do have to deal with, and sometimes it's not pleasant. Sometimes you can't come up with a solution that works for everybody or even for a whole lot of people. It's just, but you want to. I mean, it's in your heart that you really want to. People, especially when you're dealing with people you love, right? Like when I'm dealing with my own children, I don't want to give them responses and replies that they just hate. I don't want to do that. I have to sometimes. Even, and many of you don't know my children. You've come into this church after my children are all out of the house. My oldest one is 41, I have one who's 39 and one that's 36. So still to this day, there are times when, hey, Dad, can you? Can't. And so, it's not because they're asking me to do something evil. It's because I can't. Still, you don't want to disappoint, right?
Complaints of the members about the church, and you turn it into a sermon and you call it constructive criticism.
But how many people does that make happy?
You're not here to be happy. You're here to be saved.
Right. The
But you're to be happy while being saved. True enough.
joyful.
The purpose of being here is a happy place.
Yeah. In the McChurch book. Go ahead, David.
Main thing, and I know that Moses and all of them done it, is knowing that Jesus was fixing to die for their sins, and it comes to me pretty wicked.
Let me ask you a question, David. Do you think all those people knew that Jesus was going to do that 1,000 years in the future?
No, but
God
God did.
did. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. From the foundation of the world, God knew.
Jesus came to me. I thought I got saved at 12 years old, and Jesus come to me through the Holy Spirit and more or less saved me because he come up and he said he died for my sins, and ever since then I've believed it. I have problems still, of sin. But he overcomes it. I just got to believe again that he's real.
Well, I just need to point out to you, you realize you're the only one in this room who still has problems with sinning, right? Well, thank you, David. This may seem like it's somewhat unrelated, but I want to go ahead and throw this in here anyway. I read another book by a guy named Jonathan Haidt, who's a social psychologist and a big name researcher. He's written a lot of books that have been on the bestseller list because there's so much honesty and truth that Americans don't want to see, don't want to acknowledge about us. It's called The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. Would you agree that good people, even in our country, even in our community, maybe even in this room, are divided by politics and religion? And this is a graph. There are a couple of graphs I want to show you. It's the only stuff I'm going to bother you with from the results of his research. But he says that conservatives, political conservatives he's talking about, and maybe religious conservatives too, but they really emphasize maintaining a moral community. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I'm willing to bet that maintaining a moral community is pretty high on most of our lists. I'm not looking for nodding of heads or anything. I just think, from the general reaction of people I know to what's happening in our culture and trying to overwhelm the culture and trying to push stuff into the culture that maybe we think is not right, I would say that this is a priority for most people in this church. And the second one is what liberals prioritize, political liberals and religious liberals, and that's don't hurt anybody. And even to the point of don't hurt their feelings. If somebody stands before you with a beard and a mustache and a dress and they want to be called Mildred, you call them Mildred. And you say he, her. That's because you don't want to hurt feelings. You can't allow, and that's oppression. You're oppressing somebody. You don't allow oppression. Fairness is a big thing. Now, I believe that on the conservative side, fairness is a pretty big issue too, because we believe in justice, right? Justice is a big word among conservatives too. But sometimes, to me, there's a difference in definition. And I use this example a lot with especially my high school students, because I don't know how much you identify, how much you dealt with teenagers in your life, but one of the refrains you hear from teenagers all the time is, "That's not fair. That's not fair." And I would explain to them that if I went down the row and slapped every child one time, that's fair. It's not good. It's a terrible thing for me to do, but I treated everybody the same. Isn't that what fairness is? Just thought I'd throw that out there. Okay, zeitgeist. That's a German word, and I bet some of you could define it better than I can. Anybody want to volunteer? Zeitgeist. Because we're talking about a culture now, a zeitgeist, that's different from the one we grew up in. It's the spirit of the times. It was coined by a German philosopher named George Hegel. Have you looked at any old photographs? Like some of you who are close to my age, if you got out your old yearbook and looked at the pictures of your friends from high school, you would not only because you lived through it, but you look at it and you know that's a very different time. Now, if your grandchildren get a hold of your yearbook and look through it, they see your pictures when you were 17, 18 years old, and to them, you look like you're 35 because your haircut and your clothes look like an old person, right? It was the spirit of the times, the way you dress, the way you wore your hair. That was all part of it. And I also thought I should bring up the idea of movies. How are movies different in your childhood? And did you watch movies with your parents? And how different those were. You know, John Wayne movies is what I thought of immediately. And Cary Grant and Humphrey Bogart. The spirit of the time was really different, wasn't it? Old TV shows. Gunsmoke, anybody? Bonanza? And the morals that they were pushing in their stories, and the narratives there's always a moral lesson. But it was way closer to being in line to stuff that we believe than it is now, isn't it? My son was talking the other day, he's got two little kids, 5 and 8, and he was talking about how he can't let his kids watch Disney anymore because of the stuff they're pushing. But zeitgeist is the qualities that everybody in that time and place admired, or at least the majority, and imitated. Now, you might not have picked out a certain hero that you exactly copied and tried to do everything like, but weren't you influenced by certain people in that time? Maybe even people you saw on TV or in the movies, or just people that you went to church with, hopefully some, or that you went to school with, or a coach or a teacher you admired. This is a kind of a zeitgeist shift that happened to Robin, my wife, Robin. I guess it was Tuesday? Yeah. Tuesday, she went to Cersei to see her doctor, and she was wearing a shirt that said, "This world is not my home." And the nurse, who was late 20s, early 30s, she didn't ask her age, but the nurse said, "What does that mean?" Can you imagine anybody 30 years ago who wouldn't have looked at that and said, "Oh, so you're a Christian"? Even if they didn't believe, they would have known what it meant, right? And Robin said, "It means heaven is my home." And the nurse said, "Oh, are you depressed?" didn't understand the message at all. A big part of the zeitgeist of our times, the modern Western view of religion, this is kind of it, right? Believe what you want to believe, but keep it to yourself. You don't have to share it with anyone. Don't tell anyone what you believe. Are you aware that that's what's around you? That nobody wants to hear what you think? It's also part of our political zeitgeist, right? Even around the Thanksgiving table, we don't want to talk politics. In my family, we can't. As soon as they start, there's going to be an argument, and some of my children are going to get up and leave the table and walk out to the porch and just let off steam because they don't agree with the other side of the table at all. So if you're not on my side, just shut up about it, right? I shouldn't have to hear your opinion. I shouldn't have to listen to this. How many institutions over the past years have established safe places? Are you familiar with this phenomenon? The safe places where you can go and not have to hear anything or see anyone who disagrees with you. Wouldn't that be terrible? To have to encounter people who have a different opinion? And to me, what that says is you shouldn't have to think rationally about anything. And how I feel is the only thing that matters. And that's my truth. Have you heard that? My truth. If your words conflict with my beliefs, your words are violence. And this is our zeitgeist, right?
So after all this stuff that we deal with, after everything's said and done, we've still got to account for ourselves. We've only got one person that really can stand up for us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You're right, Wendell. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I think this is our last thing today. We're stopping early for parents who need to go collect children, okay, from classes. So this is the last thing. I have 1 minute left. This is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You've heard a lot of his quotations and stories from Matt and Mac. He's one of the greatest 20th century theologians, in my opinion, right up there with C.S. Lewis. And y'all all know C.S. Lewis's name. He was a German. He stood up against the Nazis. Now, I'm not saying he jumped up with signs and protested and burned buildings and stuff like that. But he did continue to teach what Jesus told him to teach, or the Bible teaches. And in 1939, before things got really terrible, he fled Germany and came to the U.S. where he would be safe. And he sat over there for 2 weeks, over here in the United States for 2 weeks, completely safe from the Nazis, and said, I just can't do this. I've got to be with my people, the people I teach, people I preach for, so that when the war is over, and he knew there was going to be a war, it had already started. Germany had already invaded Poland and was starting to go through Western Europe. And so he knew there was going to be a gigantic war, and he thought, I cannot have a part in rebuilding the church in Germany after the war if I don't suffer through it with them. Well, later he was executed by the Nazis because there was some paperwork that said he was kind of a part of a group that had hatched a plot to kill Hitler. But this is what he said about living in the culture and still being a Christian. There is not a place to which the Christian can withdraw from the world, whether it be outwardly or in the sphere of the inner life. Any attempt to escape from the world must sooner or later be paid for with a sinful surrender to the world. And I have to say, I see a whole lot of truth in that. Hope y'all have a great week. Go pick up your kids, and if you don't have kids, get to know somebody in here. Next week, we begin with what did Jesus' resistance look like?